The helicopter's rotor sliced through the crystalline mountain air as Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the frosted window, watching the endless expanse of snow-covered peaks stretch toward the horizon. Mount Kaskawash rose like a jagged tooth against the pewter sky, its summit shrouded in swirling clouds that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly menace. "First time up here, Doc?" shouted Jake Morrison over the engine's roar, his weathered hand steady on the controls, despite the turbulence that rattled their bones. The veteran pilot's eyes held the kind of wariness that came from 30 years of flying rescue missions in these unforgiving mountains. Sarah nodded, her breath fogging the glass. The university's been trying to get funding for this expedition for 3 years. Ancient petroglyphs, possibly pre-Columbian. If we're right, this could rewrite North American history. Behind them, her research partner, Dr. Marcus Webb, fumbled with his equipment, his academic composure cracking as another violent gust sent their stomachs lurching. "Remind me why we couldn't wait until spring," he muttered, his usually pristine appearance disheveled by the rough flight. "Because the ice caves are only accessible during the deep freeze. The spring melt will flood them for another year." Jake's expression darkened as he studied the weather instruments. "Speaking of ice, we've got a storm system moving in faster than predicted. I can get you to the base camp, but if this weather turns, you might be stuck up there for days." The helicopter banked sharply, revealing their destination, a small cluster of orange tents huddled against the mountain's base like bright flowers blooming in hell. Smoke rose from a central fire pit, and tiny figures emerged from the shelters, waving at their approach. As they descended, Sarah caught sight of something that made her blood run cold. Dark stains in the snow, too red to be anything but blood, formed a chaotic pattern around what looked like the remains of a camp. "Jake, what's that over there?" The pilot followed her gaze, and his face went ashen. "Jesus Christ, that's the geological survey team that went missing last week." He grabbed his radio. "Base camp, this is Morrison. We've got a situation here." The radio crackled with static before a gruff voice responded. "This is Tom Blackwood. What kind of situation?" "The missing survey team. Found their camp. It's bad, Tom." As they touched down, the rotor wash sent snow swirling in ghostly spirals. Tom Blackwood, the expedition's grizzled guide, approached with 3 other team members. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a folklore specialist whose dark eyes seemed to hold ancient secrets. David Park, a young graduate student whose enthusiasm barely masked his terror. And Lisa Chen, Sarah's younger sister and the team's photographer, whose camera hung around her neck like a talisman. "Welcome to paradise," Tom said grimly as they unloaded their gear. His breath formed white clouds that dissipated quickly in the bitter wind. "We need to talk about what happened to the survey team." The group gathered around the fire pit as Jake prepared for immediate departure, the approaching storm making every minute precious. Tom's weathered face was grave in the flickering light. "Found their camp this morning. Looks like something attacked them in the night. Tents shredded, equipment scattered. But here's the strange part, no bodies." "Could be bears," Marcus suggested hopefully, though his voice lacked conviction. Elena shook her head, her accent thick with worry. "Not bears. I've seen bear attacks. This is different. The local Inuit have stories about this mountain. They call it Wendigo's throne." "Wendigo," corrected Tom quietly. "And those aren't just stories, Doc. My grandfather was Cree. He told me things about these mountains that would make your blood freeze." Lisa lowered her camera, her face pale. "What kind of things?" Before Tom could answer, a sound echoed across the peaks, a howl that seemed to come from the mountain itself, low and mournful and hungry. It raised the hair on everyone's necks and sent a primal chill down their spines. Jake was already climbing back into his helicopter. "That's my cue to leave. I'll be back in 3 days, weather permitting. Keep your radios on Channel 7. As the helicopter lifted off, its lights disappearing into the gathering dusk, the team stood in a circle around their fire, suddenly feeling very small and very alone. The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of something ancient and wrong. "We should set up a watch schedule," Tom said, checking his rifle. "Something's out there, and it's hungry." Sarah looked up at the towering peak above them, where shadows seemed to move independently of the clouds. Somewhere in those ice caves lay the answers she'd spent her career seeking. But as another howl echoed through the night, closer this time, and filled with an intelligence that chilled her soul, she wondered if some knowledge was too dangerous to uncover. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks spiraling into the star-filled sky, while in the darkness beyond their small circle of light, something watched and waited with the patience of the eternally damned. Dawn broke gray and merciless over Mount Kaskawush, the sun a pale disk struggling through layers of storm clouds. Sarah woke to the sound of Lisa screaming. She bolted upright in her sleeping bag, her breath forming instant clouds in the frigid air. Outside their tent, chaos erupted as the team scrambled from their shelters. Lisa stood frozen beside the supply cache, her camera hanging forgotten around her neck, pointing at something that made Sarah's stomach lurch. Their food supplies lay scattered across the snow in a pattern of deliberate destruction. Cans had been torn open with impossible precision, their contents devoured, while packages of dried goods were shredded as if by massive claws. But it was the tracks that sent ice through Sarah's veins, footprints larger than any human's, with elongated toes ending in what could only be talons, pressed deep into the frozen ground. "What the hell did this?" David whispered, his young face pale with terror. Tom knelt beside the tracks, his expression grim. "Something that walks on two legs but isn't human." He measured the prints with his hand. 15 inches long, maybe more. Look at the depth. Whatever made these weighs at least 400 pounds. Elena crossed herself, muttering something in Spanish. The stories speak of a creature that was once human, transformed by cannibalism and endless hunger. It grows larger with each feeding, stronger with each kill. "That's folklore," Marcus protested, though his voice shook. "There has to be a rational explanation." "Rational?" Tom stood, brushing snow from his knees. "You want rational? Something intelligent enough to avoid our watch, strong enough to tear through reinforced containers, and hungry enough to eat everything we brought? That rational enough for you?" Sarah forced herself to think like a scientist, pushing down the primal fear clawing at her chest. "We need to reach the ice caves today. If there's a predator in the area, we can't stay exposed out here." "The caves might be its den," Lisa said quietly, her photographer's eye studying the destruction with professional detachment despite her fear. "Then we'll deal with that when we find it," Sarah replied, surprised by the steel in her own voice. "We didn't come this far to turn back now." The team packed their remaining supplies with nervous efficiency, each sound in the wilderness making them jump. The wind had picked up during the night, and snow began falling in thick, heavy flakes that reduced visibility to mere yards. As they began their ascent toward the cave system, Tom took point with his rifle ready, while Elena muttered prayers under her breath. The path was treacherous, carved into the mountainside by centuries of wind and ice, with drops that vanished into white oblivion. "Stay close," Tom called back. "This weather's getting worse." They climbed for 3 hours through the blizzard, their world reduced to the few feet of rocky trail visible through the swirling snow. Sarah's lungs burned in the thin air, and her fingers had gone numb despite her insulated gloves. Behind her, she could hear David's labored breathing and Marcus's muttered complaints about the insanity of their situation. It was Lisa who first noticed they were being followed. "Sarah," she whispered, grabbing her sister's arm, "look behind us." Through the snow, barely visible in the white chaos, a dark shape moved parallel to their path. It was massive, moving with an unnatural grace across terrain that challenged even their experienced guide. When the wind shifted the snow curtain for a moment, Sarah caught a glimpse of something that made her blood freeze, a gaunt, towering figure covered in matted fur, with arms that hung nearly to the ground, and a face that was almost human, but wrong in every conceivable way. "Don't look directly at it," Elena hissed. "In the stories, eye contact is an invitation." "Stories," Marcus gasped, but his academic skepticism had crumbled entirely. "Those are just stories." The creature let out a sound that was part howl, part shriek, and entirely inhuman. It echoed off the mountain walls, seeming to come from everywhere at once. The team huddled together on the narrow path, weapons drawn, as the sound faded into the wind. "The caves," Tom urgently said. "We need to reach the caves now." They ran then, abandoning caution for speed, their boots slipping on ice-covered rocks as they climbed toward salvation. Behind them, the creature's howls grew closer, and Sarah could swear she heard the scrape of claws on stone. The cave entrance appeared through the snow like a mouth in the mountain's face, dark and uninviting, but offering shelter from both the storm and their pursuer. They tumbled inside, gasping and shaking, as Tom immediately began setting up a defensive position at the entrance. "It won't follow us in here," Elena said, though her voice lacked conviction. "The caves are sacred ground, even the Wendigo respects." Her words were cut off by a sound from deep within the cave system, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from the mountain's very bones. In the darkness beyond their flashlight beams, something moved. Sarah realized with growing horror that they hadn't found sanctuary. They had walked directly into the creature's lair. The growl from the cave's depths reverberated through the stone corridors like the mountain's dying breath. Sarah's flashlight beam trembled as she swept it across ancient walls covered in petroglyphs. The very symbols she'd come to study now seemed to writhe and dance in the shifting light, telling a story of hunger and horror that predated human civilization. "We need to go back," David whispered, his voice cracking with terror. "We need to go back right now." But Tom was already shaking his head, his rifle trained on the cave entrance. "Can't. It's out there, waiting. I can smell it, like rotting meat and old bones." Elena moved closer to the wall paintings, her folklore expertise overriding her fear. "These aren't just decorative, they're warnings." Her finger traced symbols that seemed to pulse with malevolent life. "This one shows the transformation, a human becoming something else. And this," she paused at a particularly disturbing image, "this shows the feeding." The pictograph depicted a towering skeletal figure hunched over smaller human forms, its elongated limbs and distended jaw unmistakably predatory. Around it, smaller symbols suggested an endless cycle of hunger and death. "How old are these?" Sarah asked, her scientific mind still functioning despite the terror clawing at her chest. "Older than anything we found in North America, maybe 3,000 years, maybe more." A sound echoed from deeper in the cave, the scrape of claws on stone, deliberate and patient. Whatever was in here with them was taking its time, savoring their fear. "We go deeper," Sarah decided, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "If this thing has been here for thousands of years, there might be something in these caves that can help us understand it, maybe even stop it." "Or maybe we're walking into its dining room," Marcus muttered, but he followed as they moved deeper into the mountain's heart. The cave system was vast, a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers carved by millennia of ice and water. Their flashlights revealed more petroglyphs, each more disturbing than the last. Some showed the creature growing larger with each feeding. Others depicted rituals of binding and banishment. It was in the deepest chamber that they found the bones. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, arranged in careful piles against the walls. Human bones, picked clean and sorted by type. Femurs with femurs, skulls with skulls, ribs stacked like cordwood. The sight was so overwhelming that Lisa doubled over and vomited, her camera clattering to the stone floor. "Jesus Christ," Tom breathed. "How long has this thing been feeding?" Elena was studying the bone arrangements with horrified fascination. "It's not random. Look at the patterns. This is ritualistic. The Wendigo isn't just killing for food, it's collecting." That's when they heard it, a voice, human but wrong, echoing from the shadows beyond their lights. "So hungry, always so hungry." The words were stretched and distorted, as if spoken by vocal cords not designed for human speech. David whimpered and pressed himself against the cave wall, while Marcus fumbled for his radio with shaking hands. "The radio won't work down here," Tom said quietly. "We're on our own." The voice came again, closer now. "Fresh meat, warm blood." Sarah forced herself to think,
to analyze, to find a solution in the face of impossible horror. "The petroglyphs," Sarah said suddenly. "Elena, what did the binding rituals show?" "Fire and sacrifice." A shadow moved at the edge of their light, an impossibly tall and gaunt silhouette. The creature stepped into view, and Sarah's mind struggled to process what she was seeing. It had once been human, the basic structure was there, but starvation and something far worse had transformed it into a nightmare. Its skin was gray and stretched tight over protruding bones. Its limbs elongated beyond human proportions. Its face was the worst part, still recognizably human, but twisted by endless hunger into something that belonged in the deepest circles of hell. "You came to me like the others," it said, its voice like wind through a graveyard. Lisa grabbed her camera and in a moment of either courage or madness began taking pictures. The flash strobed through the chamber, and with each burst of light, the creature seemed to flicker and change, as if it existed partially in another dimension. "The flash!" Elena gasped. "It doesn't like the light!" But the creature was already moving, crossing the chamber with impossible speed. Tom fired his rifle, the shot echoing deafeningly in the enclosed space. The bullet struck the Wendigo's center mass, but it barely slowed down. Instead, it let out a shriek that seemed to come from the mountain itself. "Run!" Sarah screamed. They scattered like leaves in a hurricane, each taking a different tunnel as the creature's claws scraped against stone where they had been standing. Sarah found herself alone in a narrow passage, her flashlight the only thing between her and absolute darkness. Behind her, she could hear the others shouting, their voices growing fainter as they fled deeper into the mountain's maze. She pressed herself against the cold stone wall, trying to control her breathing when she heard footsteps approaching. Slow, deliberate, patient. The Wendigo wasn't chasing them. It was herding them deeper into its domain, where escape would be impossible. In the distance, she heard Lisa scream, a sound of pure terror that cut through the mountain's silence like a blade. Then, abruptly, the scream stopped. Sarah closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to any god that might be listening, knowing that her sister was either dead or something far worse.
The silence that followed Lisa's scream was more terrifying than any sound the Wendigo had made. Sarah pressed herself deeper into the narrow crevice where she'd taken refuge, her flashlight dimmed to conserve battery, listening to the mountain's heartbeat, the slow drip of melting ice, the whisper of wind through stone passages, and underneath it all, the patient scrape of claws on rock. Her radio crackled with static, then Marcus's voice, barely a whisper. "Sarah, are you there? I found David. He's hurt bad." She keyed the radio carefully, knowing the creature might be listening. "Where are you?" "Chamber with the ice formations. Follow the main tunnel north, then down. Sarah, there's something you need to know about this thing." Against every instinct screaming at her to stay hidden, Sarah began moving through the tunnels. The petroglyphs seemed to watch her pass, their ancient warnings now feeling like mockery. She'd come here seeking knowledge, and she'd found it, but the price was becoming unbearable. She found Marcus and David in a crystalline chamber where ice formations created a forest of frozen spears. David was propped against the wall, his leg bent at an unnatural angle, his face gray with shock and pain. Marcus knelt beside him, his academic composure completely shattered. "I fell," David whispered through gritted teeth. "When we scattered, I took the wrong tunnel. There was a drop, and He gestured weakly at his mangled leg. "But that's not the worst part. I saw something down there, in the deeper chambers." Marcus looked up at Sarah, his eyes haunted. "There are more bones down there, fresh ones. And Sarah, some of them are wearing the Geological Survey team's clothing." The implication hit her like a physical blow. The missing team hadn't just been killed, they'd been stored, preserved in the mountain's natural refrigeration for future feeding. The Wendigo wasn't just a mindless predator, it was intelligent, planning, conserving its resources. "Where's Tom?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Haven't seen him since we scattered, but I heard gunshots about 20 minutes ago, then nothing." David grabbed Sarah's arm with surprising strength. The petroglyphs in the lower chamber, they're different, newer. They show the binding ritual, but there's more detail. The creature can be contained, but it requires... He swallowed hard. It requires a willing sacrifice. Someone has to stay behind to complete the ritual. Before Sarah could respond, Elena's voice echoed through the chamber, but it was wrong, too calm, too measured. "Sarah, Marcus, I found something wonderful down here. You need to see this." Marcus started to respond, but Sarah clamped her mouth over his. Elena's voice had come from the wrong direction, and there was something in its tone that made her skin crawl. The Wendigo was a mimic, she realized. It could imitate human voices, lure them deeper into its web. "Elena's dead," she whispered. "That thing is using her voice." The voice came again, closer now. "Sarah, please, I'm hurt. I need help." David whimpered, his pain making it hard for him to stay quiet. Sarah made a decision that would haunt her forever. She pulled out her emergency flare and handed it to Marcus. "When I give the signal, light it and run. Get David out of here. Follow the main tunnel back to the entrance." "What about you?" asked Marcus, though his eyes already held the terrible understanding. Someone has to complete the ritual, and someone has to find Lisa. She left them before they could argue, moving deeper into the mountain's heart. The tunnels here were older, carved not by water, but by claws, their walls scarred with the marks of the Wendigo's passage over countless centuries. The air grew colder with each step, and her breath formed clouds that seemed to hang in the still air, like ghosts. She found Lisa in the deepest chamber. Her sister was alive, but barely. She hung suspended in a web of ice and sinew, her camera still clutched in one frozen hand. The Wendigo had been saving her, keeping her fresh for later consumption. Lisa's eyes tracked to Sarah's face, and she tried to speak, but only a whisper emerged. "Sarah, run." The Wendigo emerged from the shadows behind Lisa, and Sarah finally saw it in its full, terrible glory. It stood nearly 9 feet tall, its emaciated frame draped in the tattered remains of clothing from its victims. Its face was a nightmare fusion of human features stretched over an elongated skull, with eyes that held an intelligence both ancient and utterly mad. "Sister," it said in Elena's voice, then shifted to Tom's gruff tones. "Come to feed the hunger." Sarah raised her flashlight like a weapon, the beam causing the creature to hiss and recoil slightly. "Let her go. Take me instead." The Wendigo tilted its head with predatory curiosity. "Both will feed the hunger, but you first." It lunged with impossible speed, but Sarah was ready. She triggered her emergency flare, filling the chamber with brilliant red light. The Wendigo shrieked and stumbled backward, its form seeming to waver in the intense illumination. In that moment of distraction, she reached Lisa and began cutting through the sinew bonds with her knife. Her sister's eyes fluttered open, focusing with effort. "The camera," Lisa whispered. "The flash, it hurts it. But Sarah, there's something else. I saw, in the deepest chamber, eggs." The word hit Sarah like a thunderbolt. The Wendigo wasn't just a solitary monster, it was breeding. The hunger that drove it wasn't just for food, but for the continuation of its cursed species. The flare began to dim, and the Wendigo crept closer, its claws scraping against stone. Sarah helped Lisa to her feet, her sister leaning heavily against her. "Can you walk?" "I'll have to." They began moving toward the tunnel entrance, but the Wendigo blocked their path, its form seeming to fill the entire passage. It spoke again, this time in Sarah's own voice, perfectly mimicked. "There's no escape, Sarah. This mountain is my domain. Your friends are already dead. Join them willingly, and I'll make it quick." But Sarah had noticed something in the petroglyphs that Elena had missed. The binding ritual didn't require a willing sacrifice, it required understanding. The ancient shamans hadn't defeated the Wendigo through death, but through comprehension of its true nature. She raised Lisa's camera and triggered the flash, not once but repeatedly, strobing the chamber with light. With each burst, the Wendigo's form seemed to become more unstable, more translucent. It wasn't just sensitive to light, light was revealing its true nature. "You're not real," Sarah said,
understanding flooding through her. "You're a projection, a collective fear and hunger. The bones, the kills, they're real, but you're not. You're what this mountain has become after centuries of death and starvation." The Wendigo's shriek became a wail of rage and denial, but its form was already beginning to dissolve. The camera's flash had disrupted whatever energy field maintained its physical presence. But as it faded, Sarah heard something that chilled her to the bone, the sound of cracking shells echoing from the deepest chambers. Whatever the Wendigo truly was, its offspring were very real, and they were hatching. The mountain began to shake, and somewhere in the darkness below, something new and hungry began to climb toward the light.
The mountain's tremors grew stronger as Sarah and Lisa stumbled through the tunnels. The camera's flash, their only weapon against the shadows that seemed to reach for them with grasping fingers. Behind them, the sounds from the deep chambers grew louder, not just cracking shells now, but the wet sliding sounds of things being born into hunger. They found Marcus and David where she'd left them. The emergency flare nearly burned out. Marcus had fashioned a crude splint for David's leg, but the young man was fading fast, his face gray with shock and blood loss. "The entrance," Sarah gasped. "We have to reach the entrance." "Tom's up there," Marcus said grimly. "I heard him calling for help about 10 minutes ago. But Sarah, I don't think it's really him." The mountain shuddered again, and dust rained from the ceiling. Whatever was happening in the deep chambers was affecting the entire cave system's stability. They had minutes, maybe less, before the whole structure came down. Sarah made the hardest decision of her life. "Marcus, take David and Lisa. Get to the entrance. I'm going back." "You're insane," Marcus protested. "Whatever's down there is going to follow us out if we don't stop it here." Sarah handed Lisa her flashlight. "The camera's flash disrupts them, but it won't kill them. There has to be another way." Lisa grabbed her sister's arm with surprising strength. "The petroglyphs in the deepest chamber. I saw them while I was hanging there. They don't show a binding ritual, they show a collapse. The ancient shamans didn't defeat the Wendigo, they buried it." Understanding flooded through Sarah like ice water. The mountain itself was the prison, and the cave system was designed to be collapsed if the creature ever grew too strong. The petroglyphs weren't just warnings, they were instructions. "The support pillars," she breathed. "If I can bring down the right sections, you'll be buried with them," Marcus said flatly. Sarah looked at her sister, memorizing her face. Better than letting those things reach the outside world. She left them then, racing back into the mountain's heart as the tremors grew stronger. The sounds from below were getting closer, wet, chittering noises that spoke of things that had never known sunlight or mercy. In the main chamber, she found Tom's body, the real Tom, not the Wendigo's mimicry. He'd made it further than any of them had hoped, his rifle empty beside him, surrounded by the scattered remains of something that might once have been the creature's offspring. He died fighting, buying them precious time. Sarah picked up his rifle and the remaining ammunition, then studied the chamber structure with an engineer's eye. The cave system was a delicate balance of stone and ice, held together by key support pillars that had been carved by ancient hands. If she could bring down the right ones. The first of the new creatures emerged from the lower tunnels as she positioned the explosive charges Tom had brought for emergency rock clearing. It was smaller than the Wendigo, but no less terrifying, a pale, writhing thing with too many joints and eyes that reflected her flashlight beam like a spider's. She triggered the camera's flash, and the creature recoiled, giving her time to set the first charge. But more were coming, their chittering calls echoing through the stone corridors like a hellish chorus. The second charge went at the main support pillar, the one that held up the chamber's entire ceiling. As she worked, she could hear her team's voices echoing from the entrance. They'd made it out, were calling for her to follow. The third creature was faster than the others, reaching her before she could trigger the flash. Its claws raked across her back, sending her sprawling across the stone floor. Pain exploded through her body, but she managed to roll away as it lunged again.
The camera skittered across the floor, its flash firing randomly as it struck the stone. In the strobing light, Sarah saw the truth of what they were facing. Dozens of the creatures pouring from the lower tunnels, their pale forms writhing like maggots in the intermittent illumination. She reached the detonator with her last strength, her vision blurring from blood loss and shock. Through the tunnel entrance, she could see daylight, real, honest sunlight that she would never feel again. "I'm sorry, Lisa," she whispered and pressed the button. The explosion was tremendous, a sound like the mountain's death cry. The pillars cracked and fell, bringing down tons of stone and ice. The creatures' chittering became screams, then silence as they were crushed beneath their own weight of their own prison. Sarah felt the ceiling falling toward her and closed her eyes, thinking of her sister's face, of the knowledge they'd gained and the price they'd paid for it. But the mountain had one last surprise. The collapse created a new opening, a shaft that led directly to the surface. As the dust settled, a beam of sunlight pierced the darkness, illuminating Sarah's broken form. She was alive, barely, but alive. Hours later, Jake's helicopter found them huddled around a fire built from the wreckage of their camp. Lisa had refused to leave without searching for her sister, and her stubbornness had saved Sarah's life. As they flew away from Mount Kaskawalsh, Sarah looked back at the mountain one last time. The cave entrance was gone, sealed beneath tons of rock and ice, but she knew the truth. They hadn't destroyed the Wendigo, only delayed it. Somewhere beneath that stone prison, in chambers too deep for human exploration, the hunger waited. The mountain kept its secrets, as it always had, but now Sarah carried a different kind of knowledge, the understanding that some doors should never be opened and some hungers should never be fed. In her hospital bed weeks later, as she recovered from her injuries, Sarah would sometimes wake to the sound of chittering in the walls. The doctors said it was trauma, her mind processing the horror she had experienced. But Lisa's photographs told a different story. In the final frames, taken as the mountain collapsed, something else was visible in the strobing light. Eggs, hundreds of them, scattered throughout chambers that the collapse had never reached. The Wendigo's offspring were still down there, waiting in the dark, growing stronger with each passing day. And someday, when the mountain's prison finally crumbled, they would emerge into a world unprepared for their endless, terrible hunger.